A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So we're starting another month today. We're in the middle of a week. We've still got 3 whole days to go, Jose. We're not doing bad. But this being the first of the month, I spent a little time on what I would refer to as the customs and traditions of the show. Tailgaters, there is a bit of discussion as to whether or not being a tailgater means you're the member of a cult. And my only thought on the matter is, gosh, I sure hope so. Because it's a really good cult. But like all cults, it has its customs and traditions. So I'm going to start out by reading you the Tall Tales Rules of Engagement, the November 14, 2022 edition of the Rules of Engagement. Longtime tailgaters, of course, know all of this stuff pretty well. But we're gaining so many new listeners every day that I think from time to time I have to stop and explain things that might not be readily apparent to someone who just tuned in. And that's why I do this on the first day of every month, at least the first Tall Tales day of every month. Saturdays and Sundays are not good days here on Tall Tales. Jose and I just suffer through them. But here's how it goes. Listen to the radio talkers. Read the blogs and blog comments in the papers. Check out the conversations in the bars and coffee shops, and it soon becomes apparent that answers are often more abundant than questions concerning the important issues of the day. One of the functions of Tall Tales will be to state the questions for the answers that many seem so sure of, and then respond to those questions. Here are some of the answers that will be dealt with in the coming weeks, not necessarily in the order of their occurrence or importance. And I've got 24 answers here. Starting out, answer number 1. You can carry any gun anywhere at any time. Answer number 2. We are second-class citizens. Answer number 3. There should be term limits for senators. Answer number 12. Guam is under the Department of Interior. Answer number 13. Guamanians are statutory, not constitutional U.S. citizens. And so on, all the way down to number 24. And this could be my default list. If I ever run out of things to talk about on the air, I got 24 things right here. So that's the list of 24 things, the 24 answers that, I think a lot of people would be interested in. But then I have 3 more that are listed 0, 00, and 000. And here's how 00 goes. First answer, 000. Bob doesn't know what he's talking about. And then we've got answer number 00. Bob still doesn't know what he's talking about. And if that doesn't get it to you, there's 000. Bob, you still don't know Jack. Now, when I say Jack here, it's not the Jack of Hearts or the Jack of Clubs. It's not what you dig out of the trunk when you have a flat tire. It's not what little kids play with that rubber ball. This Jack is Drive-Through Jack. And, of course, I do know Drive-Through Jack. The very one. Drive-Through Jack called one time with a pithy comment, and notice I don't lisp, and he was in the chow line at a drive-through. So I had the pleasure of talking to Jack and the waitress taking his order at the drive-through. And in a sense, I kind of enjoyed the conversation with the waitress more than with, well, anyhow, that's Drive-Through Jack. Kind of a regular occurrence on the show here, Drive-Through Jack. We have quite a cast of characters here. We've got Drive-Through Jack, the most dangerous man in the room, a couple of ours, our Keith, and our, let's see, what's the guy from the Saipan?
R. James.
R. James, yeah. A caller who is always frank whenever he calls. We call him R. Frank. So that's the list of topics, and we go on. The list is not to suggest that there aren't plenty of other interesting questions or answers to take up every day. There are, and they can be addressed. Usually serious, sometimes humorous, Tall Tales will examine current events, government and politics, and occasionally drift into history, culture, religion, law, and once in a great, great while, but only very, very cautiously, rumors and gossips. Tall Tales is structured but can often entertain what callers want to discuss. Tall Tales is an issue-driven, fact-oriented, interactive talk show that invites audience participation. It has been the top-rated FM afternoon show in Micronesia. The Point is Pika's best radio station for 21 and 22. Now, there are facts and there are no-nos. Now, and I'll distinguish. Here are the no-nos. You know, they say that we're just statutory citizens, not constitutional. They, who is they? Well, they say, or everybody knows that Guam is under the Department of Interior. Or even better, well, we've always done it that way. Or when a person is really sure of what he's putting forward, there's no doubt in my mind. No! If that's what your proof consists of, save your breath. We don't do they say and everybody knows here on Tall Tales. How about a little analysis and some critical thinking? That's where we get somewhere in the show. Critical thinking thrives on Tall Tales. Now, don't look for an abundance of common sense on Tall Tales. Yeah, I know that everybody holds common sense in such high regard. But I repeat, don't look for an abundance of common sense on Tall Tales. Your common sense is what tells you that 1, the world is flat. 2, iron ships could never float. 3, that an object that's heavier than air could never fly. That's your common sense in action. Well, of course, common sense is to be valued, but not when it's a synonym for reverence for the status quo or timidity. While an instant and firm grasp of the obvious may occasionally be necessary, sometimes it's good to delve into the theoretical and occasionally examine the what-ifs. Common sense, or call it common sense if it is, right, Tom? One of our regular callers. Let's argue without being argumentative. Let's disagree without being disagreeable. Let's not play the game called pin the tail on the talk show host. Caveat. Look for provocative comment on Tall Tales. Tall Tales thrives on disagreement. It's not my job to get everybody to agree, to build a spirit of kumbaya. We use the word anaphemalic as the punchline to a joke on Tall Tales. So that's not what Tall Tales is all about. The way that the thought process works is, it's kind of like the Taggarty Tijeras. Taggarty tells us, Daryl Taggarty, who's a tailgater, tells us that the legislature works best when it's like a sharp pair of scissors, 2 sharp blades operating in opposition to one another. And that's oftentimes where the truth is produced. Tall Tales is an issue-driven, interactive show that invites audience participation. Usa dos na lenguaje, ifino English, dan ifino tomorrow loqui. As you were, usa dos na lenguaje, ifino English, dan ifino tomorrow loqui, gi programahu, i programata. Guahu idin midzu host, jan butlon, kasi, frihon, It's a Nazilik, too. At least I hope I'm Nazilik. Tall Tales is the name, so look out. Sarcasm, exaggeration, facetiousness, and for the tongue-in-cheek aspects of the show, and listen for Jose's horn. Yeah. Now, sometimes my sense of humor and my sarcasm and tongue-in-cheek humor is so subtle that no one understands it. No one gets it, except for Jose. So when that happens, Jose beeps his horn. And an example of how this worked, back during the days when our governor, in order to protect us from the Wuhan virus, set up checkpoints out on Marine Corps Drive. And you remember you get in this long line and drive up to this checkpoint, roll your window down, making sure you had your mask on. And a National Guardsman would say, sir or ma'am, or them, or whatever, wash your hands frequently, wear your mask, social distance, beware of COVID. You can go, sir. So this was a tremendous impediment to traffic and life in general. Everybody hated it. But the governor kept it on for a couple of months. Well, a doctor friend of mine who lived south of Hagatnya and worked at GRMC was called into GRMC during her off-duty time. It wasn't an emergency, but they wanted her to come into GRMC. So she told me later on that she got as far as the Agania checkpoint, sat there for about 20 minutes and said, the hell with it, swung a Yui, turned around, and took an alternate route through Humatak to get to GRMC because she couldn't waste any more time. And one of our listeners posted, gosh, that doctor must be new to the island. There are faster ways to get to GRMC from East Hagatnya than going through Humatak. And of course, this was a classic example of the tall tales exaggeration. And I've explained to people that the reason that I call the show Tall Tales, there are two reasons, actually. Number one, give me the side camera here, Jose. Number one is, as you can see, I'm altitudinally challenged. And then number two is because I never let the truth interfere with the telling of a good story. Yeah, so that's a little bit of anecdotal information here about the show. Tall Tales, as you were. Sit back and enjoy Zemi Ikotny. Zemi Ikotny is my bilingual backwards play on words. Zemi Ikotny translates literally to press the meat. I turn it around to mean meet the press and brag that it's so much better than what PMSNBC puts on TV. What I do is I examine the editorials of our two daily newspapers, figure out which one is the most error-free and makes the most sense, and give it the blue star. Understanding, of course, that the blue star never goes by default. Unless you meet the high standards of Tall Tales, there will be no blue star. And they're hard to come by anymore because the Post has been on strike for 3 months. And the Daily News puts stuff in the news hole where an editorial belongs. And about 1 out of every 24 times it's actually an editorial instead of a press release or a news story that they recast as an editorial just to fill the news hole. Occasionally I'll give the blue star to someone who's not part of the media cartel. As a matter of fact, Troy Torres has received 10 blue stars for Candid News. And Helen Meadowbrook got 3 of them, and Lee Weber got 3 of them. And just a couple days ago, I awarded one to none other than Ginger Crundon Cruz, who wrote an editorial that could have been on the card, Ginger versus the Governor. It's a very nicely done editorial. But that's what Zemi Ikotny is all about. We have Zemi Ikotny at the beginning of the show. We go to the 7th inning stretch directly from Wrigley Field. We wrap up the show. The home stretch starts at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. So I have a transporter like they had on Star Trek to take the show on location to all of these different places. So my job is to make the complex understandable and, if possible, interesting. Sometimes we comfort the afflicted. Sometimes we afflict the comfortable. Tall Tales is interactive. In other words, you can call and we'll chat, but no soapboxes allowed, no filibusters, no pin the tail on the talk show host either, nor hostile takeovers.
Denied.
Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host, and that's me, and I will mention from time to time that I'm very humble, and I'm extremely proud of my humility. Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host is supported by the Tall Tales think tank, to include the foreign policy guru, a constitutional law and organic act expert, a research, survey, and statistics bureau, and a script writer for the 19th floor. Yeah, the 19th floor. It would take me 2 hours to explain all the vicissitudes of the 19th floor here on the show. But as the 19th floor weaves its way back into the show, I will take a moment to explain the significance of the 19th floor. Yeah, it's kind of like Hotel California. You can get in, but you can never get out. All right, so let's go from there to the card. And the card is the main feature of Tall Tales. Well, let me go to Demi Cotney first. All right, this is another feel-good piece here, you know. Let's find out how we can make tummies warm. And let's try it. And unfortunately, it's got a huge error. If I were going to give this one a grade, it'd probably be an F-. As Mes Tzimuru, or Guam History and Chamorro Heritage Month, officially kicks off, there are a number of events and festivals taking place throughout March. I wonder what month they would have thought we'd... Yeah, okay, so March is the month, right? Today is the 1st of March. The village of Homatak is inviting the public to celebrate Guam History and Guam Heritage Festival from Friday through Monday. This is always a special festival featuring live entertainment, food trucks, games, and more. Now, folks who have been on the island for a while will remember that the March the 6th used to be referred to as Discovery Day, because legend had it that Magellan sailed into Homatak Bay on the 6th of March, 1521. And that's where he made it. That was the first contact, European contact, with actually any island in the Pacific. And that was the first one. And there's still a monument down on the beach in Homatak commemorating Magellan's landing. But then later on, you know, when we got a little bit of nationalism stirred into the mixer, why are we giving this guy credit for discovering Guam? The Chamorros discovered Guam 3,000 years ago. He didn't discover nothing. We don't need no stinking Discovery Day. So we changed it to Guam History and Chamorro Heritage Month. Valley of the Lati Adventure Park, Guam, is offering a special in March for families. The attraction is also holding its first outdoor cultural workshop of the year on Saturdays, and other workshops are scheduled throughout the month. Valley of the Lati is a very interesting place. Have you been there, Jose? Jose is on the phone with a potential green room guest. Yeah, it's a very interesting place, and I've been there a couple times. It's a great place to take visiting firemen. It's on the Talafofo River. You sail in a raft up the Telefofa River. It's like out of a movie, like a movie scene. A jungle surrounding the river, and they've got some kids from Pohnpei who show you how you can light a fire without matches. It's very interesting. I don't remember how much it costs, but it's well worth the money. Okay, the UOG Press is holding a bookshelf competition to showcase village pride and promote literacy just in time for Mes Chamorro. If we're just promoting literacy now, and today is the first of the month.
Only 1 month, though.
Yeah, I think we're not going to make it. If you can't read today, chances that you're going to read by March 31st are some way down there by slim and none. Now, here's where we get into the part that I really take issue. Due to centuries of Spanish colonialism, Japanese occupation, and the administrative control of the United States, the Chamorro language was endangered. The culture was threatened.
Wrong.
Now, that just tells me that it was written by someone who doesn't understand what the word culture means. I've got a little definition, and I've committed anthropology. I've taken some anthropology courses, and my undergraduate major was social studies. But that was back in the days when having the word studies at the end of a major meant that you could still get a job. It didn't mean that you studied a lot of useless stuff that you could only use for teaching to other people. So I have a pretty good handle on what culture means. And here's a shorthand definition. Culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, and art. But it's not static. And as cultures collide with, for want of a better term, other cultures, they're both changed. So part of the culture of Guam is part of the fact that the Spanish ran the place for a couple hundred years and the Americans for over 100 years. So that's had an impact on the language, all of the things that I just mentioned. So you can't say that, or to say like this editorial says, the culture was threatened. The only time the culture is threatened is when all of the people die.
When the very, very first people on Guam, or people landed on Guam,
Yeah.
their culture was threatened when several generations later started building laddestones.
Several hundred years later. The Laddystone era didn't start until 1100.
So it's not entirely authentic Chamorro then.
No, it's not. It was a migration from somewhere else. And the old timers would tell you that there were three classes, the lowest of which was the Manatsang, who were not allowed to live on the coast. They had to live in the interior of the island. So, cultures change, cultures evolved. The culture of this little town where I grew up, where I was born 84 years ago, is so different from what it was when I was a kid that it's really kind of hard to remember it's the same place. I know all the buildings, I know all the streets, I don't know any of the people, but the way people go about things and the way people spend their time, it used to be, and this was part of the culture. On Friday night, everybody went to the football game. All the adults went to the football game. On Saturday night, all of the adults went to one of the taverns downtown and got drunk. That was the culture. People don't do that anymore. And if you go to the football game, people go to the football game and they leave at halftime. Because nowadays, the high schools in southern Wisconsin put on such elaborate halftime shows that people come just for the halftime show. They get there for the first half to get a good seat. When the halftime show's over, they're gone. It's completely different. Back in the day, back in the 50s when I was a a football player, if we lost the homecoming game, man, it would bring some of the folks in town to almost bring them to tears. No, anyhow, that's what culture is all about.
But it's still okay to say, I miss the good old days.
Of course, that's part of your culture.
But it doesn't mean it's dead.
No.
You can always bring it back to life.
Yeah, well, sometimes you can. Now, if I were to embrace this, you know, I would say that what we should be doing in North America, we should be running around in knickers with white stockings and three-cornered hats like folks did around the time of the Revolution, you know, because we've lost our culture.
Colonial Williamsburg.
Exactly. That if you want to see what American culture, you go to Williamsburg. Every place else lost their culture. And I've even heard people say this here on the island. Oh, you know, those Americanos, you know, some of them are kind of critical of Guam. That's because they don't have a culture of their own. And it does not mean getting dressed up in snazzy costumes and wearing funny hats.
Now, see, what's interesting, and we'll flip it on that, if that's what you think culture is, then that's really a very sophomoric and amateur look on people itself.
Exactly.
Do you have to wear a costume to be cultural?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's certainly a way to get accused of cultural appropriation, Jose.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Anyhow, this makes the whole editorial worthless. The culture was threatened. Now, the language, and I've talked about this so many times too, use of the language that was discouraged, certainly by the Americans. I don't know if the Spanish discouraged it or not. I have heard Robert Underwood say that it wasn't until 1825 that the folks living on the island here, the permanent residents, the natives, referred to themselves as Chamorros. Because, you know, during the Spanish era, people were brought here from the Philippines, from Mexico, from Spain, etc. And according to one of the folks who was pretty adept at this stuff, the Spanish language was not that widely used. It wasn't like, let me think of a good example. Maybe even Mexico. You know, it's pretty hard to go somewhere in Mexico and not find people who can't speak. But if you go to Peru, you'll see signs in Quechua, the native language. You see signs in both languages. And I think Bolivia is the same way, where some of the
Probably isolated areas.
Well, and even the cities, even in Lima. Yeah. So, you know, the Spanish didn't make it so hard not to speak Spanish that it became widespread. And that's my understanding of here, that a lot of folks on the island only had a rudimentary knowledge of Spanish. Chamorro was the language used most often. Now, the Naval Administration discouraged the use of Chamorro. No question about that. After the Organic Act, up until 1973, the government of Guam discouraged the use of Chamorro. There was a sign in every government counter, and there was a citation, something like Section 1619 of the Government Code of Guam, and it would set out, English only is to be used except for official interpreter purposes. So there was only one official language, and teachers in school were supposed to require that kids spoke English in the classroom, on the playground, on the bus, wherever. And I did a little bragging here the other day, showed you a section in the first board union contract where it was a group of union teachers that actually got that first olive out of the jug and began the legitimization of Chamorro. Okay, let's come back to this right after a short break.
Every company needs money to grow and take on the challenges 2023 will bring.
That's why Bank Pacific's commercial loan officers stand ready to help you.
We offer several programs tailored to assist companies to get to the next step or perhaps for a startup.
Including working with SBA or GITA.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches.
Bank Pacific,
We want to be your partner.
Equal Opportunity Lender, member FDIC.
Credit conditions apply.
For your safety and convenience, please listen to this message. Heavy haul transports for the new Ukadu power plant are occurring almost daily and will continue for the next few months. We encourage you to use alternate routes to avoid traffic delays. Alternate routes, project information, and live tracking are available at poweronthemove.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to receive Guam PDN text alerts. Doosan Ukadu Power and Doosan Enterability thank you for your patience and support.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, so I mentioned just before the break here that in 1970, the first board union contract had a provision that said that English was expected to be used except when the use of other language would facilitate learning, and the teachers were not required to enforce any language restrictions. And that was the first dent, so to speak, in the shield. In 1973, the legislature passed a law making English and Chamorro official languages. Then we got some idea that somehow the government could help people learn Chamorro, which of course anybody knows that it just isn't going to work. So we spent a lot of money on our Chamorro language program, and I have yet to run into anybody who said he learned anything about Chamorro in the Chamorro language programs. And there are some real brutal facts here when it comes to learning languages. First fact is this: everyone who can speak has a mother tongue. It's a language you learn from infancy on, usually because you spend a lot of time with your mother. That's why it's called your mother tongue. And you get your mother tongue for nothing. You don't have to learn it. You don't pay any price for it. You get it free. It comes with the package. And your mother tongue will be the language that you feel the most comfortable in. Up until you're 11, you can actually have multiple mother tongues. You can develop native speaker competence in more than one language, provided that you have good models to pattern yourself on. Because languages are not learned with your mouth, languages are learned with your ears. So if you grow up in a multi-generational home, let's say where grandma and grandpa use Chamorro 90% of the time and mom and dad use English 90% of the time, kids growing up in that household won't think, gosh, I'm going to learn two languages here. They just know that they talk to grandma and grandpa a little differently than they talk to mom and dad. And if they stick with it, they can be perfectly bilingual. Now, we didn't understand that, in our public school system here. We thought that if you knew Chamorro, it would interfere with your learning of English. Or if you spoke English and were exposed to Chamorro, it would hurt you. Just not so. Because nowadays you can find a fair number of people on this island that are perfectly bilingual. They sound, you listen to them talk and they sound like they're from the Midwest. You listen to them speak Chamorro and they sound like they're from Humatak. And they can go from one back and forth. And I've mentioned this on the show more than once. You go to Europe and you'll find people, especially if you take a guided tour in Europe, say on a bus or even on entertainment on a ship, and you'll find MCs that'll go from French to Spanish to Portuguese to English, back and forth, just no problem, because they're exposed to all these languages in Europe. So the way to learn Chamorro, the way for people to learn Chamorro, is to be exposed to good models in the language, not in a classroom setting, but in a natural setting. And I have developed my own method of doing it, which I've mentioned on the show before. I'm not going to do it again today, but some slow day I'll go back into it again. So this editorial, wow. During Mes Chamorro, the people of Guam can reclaim those lost narratives. And of course we get into that when we get into systemic racism. What narratives are we talking about? You know, the misunderstandings about governmental structure. They celebrate their heritage and culture and spread the Chamorro language by actively speaking and teaching. Yeah. You know how many people I know that actually said, Bob, let me teach you Chamorro? Tadza. Yeah. And the only way that you're going to learn Chamorro is you got to be aggressive, and you got to go out and you got to find it. And you got to you got to try it, and you got to stumble, and you're going to get laughed at a lot. But that's the only way you can learn it. I'll just get into my method a little bit. If we had native speakers here who would wear some kind of a distinctive badge, like, say, a Lottie Stone, who had a fundamental instruction in language instruction, and knew a little bit how to teach somebody a language, so that if you're trying to learn, you can walk up to one of those people and say something like this: Hafade, Guahusi Bob, Hadzina Anmu. Translate: hello, my name is Bob. What's your name? And that person wouldn't say, you pronounced Hadzina Anmu wrong. He'd say, Guahusi Jose, Hafatatet Manuhao. My name is Jose. How are you? And I'd say, hey, kwa to tungunai hafatatet mano, haftai mano masangan hafatatet mano gifino English. You know, and start up a little dialogue like that. Start out simple. Start with the basics, so that everybody on the island that wanted to learn a language would know that if you see the guy with a Lottie Stone, there it is. There's your opportunity. And make it a matter of pride to wear one of these Lottie Stones. I am actually trying to perpetuate the language here, because if you really understand culture, language is culture. There just no, if you want to learn a language, don't let somebody talk you into learning how to cook Chamorro food, or, you know, if you want to really understand the culture, you got to know the language. And even if you do know the language, it's not, you're never finished. It's a lifelong learning process, but the process is facilitated if you know the language. So pay no attention to this silly editorial here. Mes Chamorro is a special time when emphasis is placed on teaching and learning about Chamorro culture. Small island nations are in danger of losing their culture. Wrong. And Mes Chamorro is essential to keeping the Chamorro culture, language, unique aspects of living, food, ancient history, and moral life. Ancient history. I suspect that until as recently as 20 years ago, you'd have a hard time finding anybody who would tell you about ancient history. That's part of the American culture, that we want to go way back in time, and we want to find out how things got to be the way they are, and not just take everything for granted as it is. Let's remember the importance of Mes Chamorro. Educate ourselves with Chamorro history. Enjoy some Chamorro food. Spread the language, and try to learn a little bit more this month. Mes Chamorro is more than just celebrating the Chamorro identity. It helps move Guam into a future where the history and culture are alive and valued. Well, they're alive and valued today. Keep a lookout for upcoming Mes Chamorro stories from the Daily News in the coming weeks. And if your group or business has a celebration you want to let people know about, send us a note. All right, no Blue Star today. Let's see, probably got Hope Cristobal. Just to tell you how out of socket this whole thing is, we have a Chamorro Language Commission that developed an orthography that's about as useful as the memories on a man. Really, it's a useless orthography. If you don't understand a language, you know, you learn how to speak it, and you don't want to get socked with a brand new orthography.
It's funny because, you know, every year generations create new words, and the reason why they became popular is because people use them, not because they were mandated.
Exactly. So we've got this Chamorro Language Commission as sort of the rule book for Chamorro. And the chairman of that commission is Hope Cristobal. Now, if you haven't watched the show before, make sure you tune in to the show on Monday right after the big halftime show, and you'll find out everything you want to know about Hope Cristobal in about 5 minutes. Okay, I want another Joe to tell me another perspective on culture, but I got to take a break first, Jose.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Get ready for the music event of the year. The Tumon Bay Music Festival is back, and it's better than ever. Featuring soloists, choirs, small ensembles, bands, and orchestras from Guam, the Marianas, Japan, and the U.S., TBMF offers something for every music lover. TBMF 2023 is the place to be this March. Festival events will take place at various locations on Guam, so be sure to check out the schedule on tbmfguam.org. TBMF is a production of the Guam Philharmonic Foundation. See you there.
So, Jose, I peeked at Facebook, and I see that I've got to amend the rules of engagement because Sarita Garin has reminded me of an important part of Tall Tales. I don't know if you ever saw the movie called A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
well,
know where you're going.
there's no crying on Tall Tales.
Nope.
I've got to add that in there, right? Thank you very much, Sarita Garin. Sarita is not only a tailgater and on Rogues Gallery, but she's done a triple play on the Rogues Gallery. So thank you very much, Sarita. Okay, let's see what another Joe wants to add. Another perspective on culture probably has something to do with compact impact, don't you think? Tell us about it. Tell us about it, another Joe.
Well, compact impact, Bob, is mainly about money. I think the impact of the resources. But if you want to talk about culture, the other aspect to Chamorro culture, not to disagree to the online statement, crying is part of Chamorro. Well, these are tall tales. Well, I guess if tall tales can be assimilated into Chamorro culture experience, then I'd say crying is part of Chamorro culture as far as chants, because I did read long time ago. I read some documentary, or I forget what they call it. Like the Spanish accounts that there was chanting, and if there was a little bit of skirmishes, and there were deaths, then there was definitely crying. But anyway, as far as culturally, language. The other aspect I wanted to bring up was trying to get a little bit of stage right here. Sorry. It's not just language, Bob, because I would say faith. Some people don't want to hear this, but our Catholic faith, Christian faith, because we took centuries to get to where we are now, Bob. And I don't see why we would throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have our own adaptation to different aspects of our Catholic faith, and I want to bring that up because I've seen documentaries where in Hawaiian culture they emphasize hula. So I see they're trying to do that here in Guam, some kind of hula here, and hula, Bob, going to a documentary I've seen decades ago, it's not just singing and dancing. They use it for a political statement, and in some ways they incorporate martial arts. Hula is a way, basically in Japanese, kata is a form of is a way to describe different techniques in martial arts. In the Japanese martial arts, it's a dance. Kata translates to dance. So hula is a form of dance, and they would incorporate that into their practice for martial arts.
Let
Hawaiian
me
martial
jump
arts.
in here for a second, another Joe. You've given me two really good points here that I want to emphasize. First of all, hula. You know, this is what culture isn't. When we see this group that comes down to the legislature, you know, scantily clad with all the grunting and chanting and all of that stuff, I can't remember what the name of it is. That's not culture. When we see the cultural presentations at all of these different shindigs, and we see kids and even adults going out and doing things, doing dances that Frank Rabone invented in 1979 or 1980, and he come out and said, you know, we didn't have this stuff, so I combined Samoa and Hawaii and New Zealand, etc., and came up with these things. So it's now perhaps part of the culture, but if you want to, if you're talking about preserving the culture with some kind of authenticity, that is not it. And then the other thing that you mentioned is Catholicism. You're absolutely right that Catholicism is more than just a religion here. It is part of the culture. And it's part of the culture even for folks that go to the Protestant church. And even Michael Bavacqua, it's one thing I agree with Michael Bavacqua on. He said that it is so firmly embedded in the culture that it is an essential part of the culture, Catholicism. So that's why so many of the things that happen on the island are coordinated with church events. So that's a really good point. Another Joe. I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. And if women usually live longer than the men. So my memory from the time I was a very small child is if it wasn't a priest or a nun, it was some local Chamorro female that was leading in our faith, customs, traditions. Anyway, thanks, Uncle Bob. Appreciate your time. I'll just keep listening.
All right, another Joe. Another Joe got a couple of hits today, Jose. Yeah, good going, another Joe.
And he did not need to bring up compact impact.
He did not. I was the only one that brought up compact impact. Okay, so let me see here. Yeah, I guess we go to the card next, right, Jose? Yeah. Okay, so we start out here on the card. First item on the card, as usual, is systemic racism. And I'll give a longer explanation of what systemic racism is. And I didn't say systemic racism. I said racism. And then we've got Public Law 36-34. I've got Clint versus ratepayers. And I started to tell you that I structure the program as though it were a card for a boxing match. The function of the card is to tell you who's doing what to whom and for what reason, at least as far as we can understand what the reasons are.
Is the philosophy behind like a Shakespearean play is man versus nature, and then man versus himself?
I think so.
That's the way our life is, and that's the way the card goes.
Exactly. Or you could also look at it, it looks like a court calendar, you know, with Smith versus Jones in the civil case, or Smith versus Smith in a divorce case. Yeah. So the first item on the card, substantive item, is Clint versus ratepayers. Then I've got students versus rats, Troy versus Rev Tax, Lefty versus Nebraska, Horowitz versus Antifa and IRS, Tan versus the maskless, Tom Woods versus racism. So, yeah, let's see. We got about 4 minutes here before the first half starts. So I think I'll just cruise through Facebook and see what the comments are, and then we'll start out with Clint with systemic racism, and then Clint. All right, Edward Bendicho's here, Mark Anthony, Colin Clark, Lonnie Salas, Sarita Garin, Rico Blancaflor, Sarita Garin is all in favor of critical thinking. Good for her. And we've got Bunker, Franklin Mano, better known as Bunker, Lonnie Salas, Sherry Iriarte, Maria Espinosa. And this is what Maria Espinosa says. True, culture is embedded in the language. And I could say probably the converse is true. The language is embedded in the culture. Then let's see. Bunker Mano says, be determined if you desire to learn any language. I learned Japanese and English after I learned Chamorro. And Lonnie Salas says, ha, ha, ha. Going on here. Maria Espinosa says, what was laughed at while speaking Chamorro is uniquely different from when you're speaking English. Well, I think Maria is trying to say a couple things there. Humor is culture bound. Things that are funny in one language are not necessarily funny in another. And then there's another phenomenon here that I want to explain, even if I have to do it after the break. If you're an English speaker and you travel around a little bit to foreign countries, Mexico, French, Canada, whatever, and you try to speak the language, people are accustomed to people speaking their language who are not native speakers. It's not an unusual thing. It happens all the time. If you're in Tijuana and you try out a little bit of TJ Spanish and you don't get it exactly right, nobody's going to laugh at you because they hear that sort of thing all the time. Not the same way here. There are very few people on Guam who speak Chamorro that don't speak it with native speaker competence. So when you hear someone, quote, murdering the Chamorro, that sounds really strange because you've never heard it before. And if it's unusual, strange, well, it's funny. Let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Protesters on Capitol Hill. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The first hearing of a House Select Committee to discuss threats from China got underway as demonstrators complained the U.S. should cooperate with Beijing rather than compete with it. The bipartisan committee members not swayed by that argument.
The GOP House long ago planned for this committee to focus on China, but recent episodes served as a wake-up call for Congress. There's a race between Washington and Beijing. The biggest concern for many lawmakers is the threat China poses to Taiwan. Some lawmakers want to give Taiwan the weapons it needs to stave off an invasion. Lawmakers are now working on a host of ways to fight China. One bill would ban TikTok. Another bill would make national security a factor when selling farmland near American military bases.
Fox's Chad Pergram on Capitol Hill. As for that TikTok bill, that's under the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and it's working on that to give President Biden the power to ban the Chinese app. Democratic Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot won't get a second term. She came in third in a field of 9 candidates Tuesday, behind Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson, who will advance to a runoff on April 4th. Johnson, a county commissioner, encouraging supporters after the results.
We've come together as one city to say that we deserve a Chicago that is better, stronger, safer for everyone.
Vallis is a former school's CEO.
I will not be a successful mayor until I reverse
the generations of disinvestment in Chicago's ports communities.
Lightfoot went into her re-election bid amid a soaring crime rate in the country's third largest city. And stocks closed the month in the red. All three benchmark indexes lost ground in February as the economy heated more than expected. America's listening to Fox News.
For your safety and convenience, please listen to this message. Heavy haul transports for the new Ukadu power plant are occurring almost daily and will continue for the next few months. We encourage you to use alternate routes to avoid traffic delays. Alternate routes, project information, and live tracking are available at poweronthemove.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to receive Guam PDN text alerts. Doosan Ukadu Power and Doosan Enterability thank you for your patience and support.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Their services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
The Supreme Court seems ready to reject the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness program. On Tuesday, the High Court heard pro and con arguments for more than 3 hours.
6 states arguing the Biden administration does not have the legal authority to issue nearly $500 million in student loan forgiveness say the move is executive overreach that needs congressional approval.
If nearly $500 billion is going to be canceled off the federal government's balance sheet, that's something that should come through Congress.
That's Nebraska Solicitor General Jim Campbell. The administration argues that it is allowed to make changes to student loan plans because the HEROES Act passed in 2003 allows for those changes when there's a national emergency like the COVID pandemic. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
Another close call for 2 planes at an airport.
This time at Boston Logan Airport, where the FAA says a JetBlue pilot had to take evasive action while landing at about 7 p.m. Monday when the pilot of a Learjet took off without clearance from the control tower. The FAA is investigating just how close the 2 aircraft were, but flight tracking service Flight Radar 24 says a preliminary analysis put them about 530 feet apart. The FAA says the tower had instructed the Learjet pilot to wait while the JetBlue flight landed, but after reading back the instructions, he began a takeoff roll. This is the latest in a string of close calls. There was one off the coast of Hawaii in December, another at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York in January, and in Austin, Texas in February. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
Nissan is recalling more than 800,000 small SUVs in the U.S. and Canada because a key problem could cause the ignition to shut off while driving. The recall covers Rogues from the years 2014 through 2020, as well as Rogue Sports from 2017 through 2022. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatnya location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Get ready for the music event of the year. The Tumon Bay Music Festival is back, and it's better than ever, featuring soloists, choirs, small ensembles, bands, and orchestras from Guam, the Marianas, Japan, and the U.S. TBMF offers something for every music lover. TBMF 2023 is the place to be this March. Festival events will take place at various locations on Guam, so be sure to check out the schedule on tbmfguam.org. TBMF is a production of the Guam Philharmonic Foundation. See you there.
it's Tall Tales Rogues Gallery, and there are probably hundreds of people out there asking themselves, how do I get my picture on that Rogues Gallery? So tell them again, Jose.
I'll tell them just like I told another listener that inquired via email this weekend. They have to point their browser to thepoint.gu. Thepoint.gu is the official website of this radio station. There's a picture of a T-shirt and a beard. It's a faceless beard, but it's there on the T-shirt. Click on that link, and it'll take you to the site where you can order your shirt. When the shirt arrives, put it on, take a selfie, and send that selfie to the Point's WhatsApp number at 671-797-8255, and we will put you in the Rogues Gallery rotation.
And what a great place to be. Being famous overnight. Yeah. Okay, so second half of Tall Tales here after that great halftime show that we've all come to know and love so much. And I'm going into systemic racism, and I'm going to give you kind of the full treatment on systemic racism here. On November 26, 2021, a gentleman named Paul Zerzan wrote a letter to the Daily News. And the title of his letter is, Red Rice Isn't Red, It's Orange. And he goes on to say, the world is undergoing rapid change and cultures are experiencing traumatic shocks as cherished myths are destroyed by cruel realities. Guam is no exception, and we are far enough into the 21st century to face a very ugly fact concerning the false basis concerning something very central to the Chamorro belief system, since it very much concerns feasting associated with the holiday season. Now is a good time to get to the truth. There is no such thing as red rice.
How dare you?
The atoti-colored rice traditionally eaten on Guam is orange and not red. Calling it red rice for centuries does not make it red. It's orange, and a color wheel is not needed to see this. And, of course, I've drawn out this picture here. There it is. Is that rice in the bowl, is it red or orange? Now, you regulars know that every Monday is Red Shirt Monday, and I wear my red shirt on the show, don't I, Jose?
Every Monday.
Every Monday, and it's the same color as this rice here. I'm just pulling your leg when I do that. So the truth is that the rice that you see at Fiesta that's colored with atoti is not red, it's orange. So that ran in the Daily News. A couple days later, on December 1st, this story ran in the lifestyle section over the byline of Therese Padua Howe. Readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. Longtime educator Paul Zerzan, a prolific writer of letters to the editor, is once again stirring the pot, this time one of the island's most beloved pots, and the people of Guam are not having it. In a letter published Friday, he objected to calling red rice by that name, proposing to instead call it by the hue he sees most often, orange rice. So it's not everybody, it's just Paul. Some form of chromatic insufficiency, right?
As many times as you've read that, that's the first time I've heard how he sees.
That he sees.
That definitely is systemic racism.
It is. Some readers on social media question why the PDN was even entertaining the topic when there are more pressing issues at hand.
How dare you?
But it surely touched a nerve. Posts on the topic reached more than 100,000 accounts and generated 1,000 comments. The majority vehemently rejected the proposal, such as Cecile Chargalov's comment on the group 671 Guam recipes. Here's a quote from Cecile Chargalov. Quote, why change traditions? It's like, here we go again, being invaded and changing what is naturally ours to what they think it should be because they don't like it. I don't care if it's not the color they're liking or it's not dark enough for them. Just leave that traditional thing to be. just that, tradition. So systemic racism mix in a little xenophobia there too, Jose. Maybe that's part of the culture, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Paul told me later on he's been canceled. The Daily News won't run his stuff anymore. So the fact is this. Anyone with eyes can see that the rice is orange. That's the facts. That's the truth. The narrative, what people are saying, what people will put up with, is that the rice is red. And they will suppress the truth in favor of the narrative. I've shown it on this card here. Give me the side camera, Jose. You see word number 1 is orange, right? But what color is the word orange?
Red.
Yeah, and you see word number 2 is red. But what color is the word red?
Red rice.
It's orange. So, looking at this is the narrative and the truth. The truth is that the letters are orange, but the word is red. That's the narrative. And this so easily demonstrates the conflict between the narrative and the facts or the truth that I've made it part of the teaching opportunities here on the show, because we run into this all the time, where there's a narrative floating around that's absolutely contrary to the truth. But people who want to speak the truth or advertise the truth that contradicts the narrative find themselves being on the short end, on the fuzzy end of the lollipop, or perhaps even being canceled like Paul Zerzan was. And I had some of these things here. I collected a few of them. As an example, maybe I can't find it. I probably should have hunted it down before we started. Yeah, I have several examples here, but I had a short one that I can't put my fingers on right now that would have worked out just really well in my non-systemic system of keeping my papers together. But I dwell on that systemic racism because it occurs so often where we have the absolute facts and truth that contradict the narrative, and so often the narrative has the champions, and the one who would speak the truth has to defend himself. I give you some contemporary examples that we run across all the time. A person who's born with male plumbing, if he really wants to be, can become a woman. 2 men can get married. A woman, as you were a man, can get pregnant, can menstruate. We've got to have sanitary products in every men's room. This is what I mean. This is the narrative. And if you follow along in the media cartel publications, it's everywhere. And someone who comes along and says, hey, wait a minute, a marriage is a man and a woman. The purpose of marriage is procreation. A man can't procreate, a woman can't procreate. They can do it together. It's complementarity. That's why we developed this institution called marriage a long, long time ago. A man marrying a man is an oxymoron. And anyone who says that runs the risk of, hey, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe, you're a bad person. Go back where you came from, right, Jose? So when we run across these things and I describe it as systemic racism, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, that's what we call systemic racism here on the show. Next on the card, I've got, I had Clint versus
Ratepayers.
Yeah, Clint versus ratepayers. What did I do with it? I'm going to have to go to the Post and get this article because I had it right in front of me here a minute ago, but I can't put my fingers on it right now. So I'm going to go to, give me a minute here, Jose, and I'm going to go to the online Post. Maybe you could tell our listening audience what Clint is doing now.
I think he's the chief of staff. But he's still irritating ratepayers?
He's the deputy chief of staff.
Deputy.
Yeah, for the governor. So he didn't run for re-election, and he became the deputy chief of staff for Governor Leon Guerrero.
Mm-hmm. That was formerly Alice Tyron's position.
Yes.
Tyron's position.
Yes.
Now, is a deputy an assistant? Just another created position? Because there is a chief of staff, right?
Yes.
And then there's a deputy chief of staff.
Yes.
Is there a whole posse of chiefs of staffs?
I would suppose so. Deputy chiefs of staff. It's kind of like the marshal and the deputy marshal.
Right.
The sheriff and the deputy sheriff.
Every day must be high noon.
Yeah,
That's a Clinton Ridgell campaign platform joke. That's why I'm not the host, guys.
How did it go?
Every day is Clint's high noon.
Yeah, I found it. It's the Daily News. Yeah, and here it goes. A planned new 41 megawatt diesel power plant in Petey has been scrapped because of rising construction costs, according to the Public Utilities Commission, which last week approved the Power Authority's request to cancel the facility's contract. The Petey diesel power plant, which was supposed to supplement the new 198 megawatt power plant under construction at Ukadu by providing reserve power to the grid as needed, no longer is necessary, according to GPA. As a result, Petey, which has been home to the island's largest power plants for decades, no longer will have an operating power plant after September 30, 2029. The oil-burning Cabris 1 and Cabris 2 generators in Petey are scheduled to close in late 2024 after the Ukadu power plant starts operating. The Petey 8 and 9 generators, which were also scheduled to shut down in 2024, instead will be operated through fiscal 2029, a 5-year extension that could be approved by the PUC during its meeting in late March. The Power Authority in 2019 signed a contract with a consortium formed by Korea Electric Power Corporation and Korea East-West Power Company that will finance, build, and operate the new 198 megawatt power plant and sell the electricity to GPA. The fuel-efficient plant is scheduled to start operating in 2024, significantly reducing the amount of fuel needed to generate power for the island and lowering power bills for GPA customers. The companies do business here as Guam Ukadu Power. The contract included construction of a reserve generator at the Ukadu site, but federal clean air restrictions at the Ukadu site prompted the contractor and GPA to shift the proposed reserve generator to Petey next to existing power plants it could operate more often with fewer restrictions. The goal is to get cheaper power rates for everyone. Now, that's a quote not from somebody from the Power Authority, but from the mayor of Petey, Jesse Alec, also known as Smart. What's his name, Jose?
Smart Alec.
Smart Alec, yeah. Tuesday, adding he was not concerned about the plan to build the 41-megawatt reserve power plant in the village. We've always made sure that the air quality was checked, etc. Guam lawmakers passed 2 laws to allow the Petey Reserve diesel project to move forward. A bill to exempt it from further buffer zone around the schools, and a bill to authorize a 30-year lease for the Petey site and for the Ukadu site. Both changes were requested by the contractor in order to secure financing for the project. The problem was that the Ukadu plant, that Ukadu Power had indicated that unless the legislation could be approved by March 31, 2022, the price could not be guaranteed for the reserve plant. PUC Administrative Law Judge Harecki said that during last week's PUC meeting. The legislature passed the power plants bills in April of June 2022. So March 31, they finally did it in June of 2020. They missed the deadline. Ukadu Power then told GPA that the diesel power project's price would increase from $57 million to $97 million. Harecki said, and GPA decided the higher cost made the project economically infeasible. The cancellation of the 41 megawatt Cabras Reserve facility does not endanger GPA's ability to provide sufficient capacity for the system, the PUC stated in its order last week. That's because GPA plans to instead use PD8 and PD9, etc. But it's costing us a lot more money. And the reason it's costing us a lot more money is guess whose committee entertained this bill that had the March 31 deadline? Clint.
Sabotaged.
Exactly. And Clint, if Clint could have had his way, if he had been the maximum ruler here, we'd have shut the power plants down on the first day of his term in the legislature and gone completely to solar. He was very critical of the Power Authority, which laid out a really nice plan. Why are you building this new diesel fuel power plant? You should be doing solar, and they're going to be solar by 2035. But I guess Clint hasn't been outside at night very often. He doesn't realize that the sun doesn't shine at night. So by dragging his feet on this whole thing, he thoroughly screwed it up, and we'll be paying for it not only for the rest of my life, but for the rest of his life. But it worked out well for him. We always had the suspicion that some of the senators, some of the Democrat senators were carrying water for the governor. Well, Clint didn't run for re-election, but he had a soft landing. He's now deputy chief of staff for the governor. So thank you very much, Clint Rigel. I'd have to say Clint was something of a disappointment.
But that's how you get a pay raise.
I guess so. Okay, next we've got students versus rats. Let's head for Wrigley Field, which is probably rat-free.
Attention investors, Century 21 Realty Management is proud to present an investment opportunity you have to look at. Ladera Towers Condominium provides luxury living centrally located in Manila with access to the entire island. Ladera Towers has 3-bedroom condominium units available now. See them before they're all gone. 4-bedroom units sold out. This investment is only going to appreciate in value. Call now, Century 21 Realty Management. The number is 647-5003 or visit laderatowerguam.com or guamproperties.com.
Guam. Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagatnya location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
So I took a peek here at Facebook during the break, and Bunker Mano helps out here with systemic racism. Now, I did the long the long explanation of systemic racism, and I suppose I should have wound up by saying I really don't care what color the rice is. The purpose of going through this is it's an easy way to understand the narrative versus the truth. It's an analogy. Bunker Mano comes along and says the red is visible when you water down the achoti, so it's got its name from the achoti. So what?
What's interesting is if nobody had reacted to Paul Zerzan's letter, we wouldn't even be talking about it right now.
Exactly. You know, and it's not about what color the rice is. It's about how people can get stuck on a narrative and stay with that narrative regardless of what the facts and the truth are. And that's why we keep talking about systemic racism.
Getting back to the power plant story, Bob, I have a question about the project was supposed to be $57 million.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the PUC had a way of either setting aside that money or had a plan to pay that. But now that the power plant is not going to be built, what happens to that plan? Is there still going to be money set aside? Has there been money set aside?
The PUC doesn't do that. The PUC is strictly a regulatory agency.
Okay.
And when we, once upon a time, power, water, telephone were all run general government agencies. They didn't own any real property. They didn't have any legal existence. We changed that when we went with GPA and created something like a government corporation, deeded government land to the Guam Power Authority, and gave it the ability to borrow money. So now the Power Authority can borrow money. It goes on the bond market and borrows money. And our bonds have a certain attractiveness to them because they are triple tax exempt. Because they're federal obligations, there can be no state tax, there's no federal tax on our bonds. So, we can pay a little bit less interest on our bonds than other bond issuers do. So there's always a market for our bonds. But in order, when we started trying to float bonds, what are they called? Underwriters said, we're not going to be able to sell your bonds unless you have an independent regulatory public utilities commission on your island. Because no bond issuer or no bond buyer is going to expose himself to the greed of a local government who will just tax the hell out of the bonds or whatever. So there has to be an independent rate-setting commission. So we enacted the Guam Public Utilities Commission, and all they do is regulate rates. And it's a pretty far-reaching regulatory authority, but they don't have any money. I think they've only got 2 staff, 7-member commission, et cetera. So when the Power Authority or the Water Authority want to do something, they petition the Consolidated Commission on Utilities, which was created in 2002. If the commission approves, then a petition is filed with the Public Utility Agency, a Public Utility Commission, to take the necessary action, rate-setting action, or whatever is necessary to go on the bond market and borrow the money. And the bonds are liquidated through the revenue produced by the utility. They're revenue bonds, called revenue bonds. So that's the way it all works. So the $57 million would have been funded by a bond issue. But of course, since we didn't do it, there's no bond issue. So there's no $57 million laying around somewhere. And there never would have been.
That's my very no knowledge question kind of. It's just to understand where the rate increases come from, how things are getting paid. Even a question of the Ukadu plant is a private industry. They're going to be selling the electricity back to GPA. How does that lower our rates, or how does that save on fuel? Because it's just another plant.
Yeah. Well, let me back off on the bond issue explanation doesn't work as well here, because what they are doing is they're making a deal to sell us power in a particular rate structure. And they know that the rates are regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. So it's a wonderful thing for us because, and it slipped my mind, but we don't have to go on the bond market because these guys are financing the whole thing. They're building it, they're operating it, and they're selling the power to us at a rate we can afford. And if this had been built, when we get the $198 million power plant built, the rates will be significantly lower. And then, of course, and we're going head first into solar power, which probably reduces the rates by half. So we've got a very well-functioning Consolidated Commission on Utilities. It's doing things right almost all the way along the line. And then we got Clint Rigel, who showed up at the legislature with his backpack. And when I opened up his backpack and looked in there. You know what he had in there?
What was it?
About a half dozen monkey wrenches. And it didn't care what kind of a machine Power and Water wanted to work on. Clint had and he threw a monkey wrench into this
And
one.
monkey wrenches are stuck on a narrative.
Exactly, yeah. All right, let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll come back to students versus rats, huh?
We're back from Wrigley Field.
We're back from Wrigley Field already, okay. Students versus rats. Schools may be rat infested, but businesses can't according to GovGuam's actual rules. And this is a Troy Candid News production. And this is what he says: the dissonance between promises elected officials make versus the reality of government and the bureaucracy oftentimes is astounding. Election after election, most candidates ride along public opinion consensus that education is their first priority. But the money hardly follows the hot air coming from their mouths. For instance, did you know that according to GovGuam's own rules, the presence of rats in a business will result in a shutdown for the company? But those same rats can run around the school, and the Department of Public Health and Social Services will give the school system a pass. Consider that for a minute. According to GovGuam policy, it's less important to assure the health and safety of public school students than it is to protect adults at work. Last week, public health sanitary inspectors shut down a restaurant in Tamuning on the report from a customer who allegedly saw a rat running across the place. On Tuesday, a Tejan High School student sent Candid a picture of a dead rat and gigantic roaches in one of the restrooms. Now, they left out the key fact here. Was it a male rat or a female rat? That's pretty important, Jose.
We'll never know about them.
Yeah. The student sent a video of the same scene hours later and sent it to Candid. No one at the school had done anything about it. Candid sent a photo to Public Health Director Art St. Augustine with a question, quote, if Public Health is able to shut down Denny's on the eve of a witness report of a rat, should Public Health shut down Tejan High with this actual evidence of a rat left to rot among the kids for an entire day? St. Augustine referred the question to the chief of the Division of Environmental Health, the part of Department of Public Health where sanitary inspectors work. A gentleman named Matsumoto Tom Nadeau responded to Candid, saying, Director St. Augustine forwarded your inquiry to me about the concerns of rats at Tejan High and why DPS has not shut down the school like it did for Denny's restaurant recently. Section 4719 of the new rules and regs governing school building sanitation granted existing schools 5 years from the date of the regulations' adoption to come into full compliance with the requirements. A 5-year free zone, Jose. And this is what the statute says. 4719, existing facilities. School facilities in existence at the time of these regulations take place shall be given 5 years from the date that these rules become effective to come into full compliance with the requirements of these rules, unless a school facility or a person files a written statement of exception with the director and receives a variance. Wow. Even 5 years might not do it. As a result, public health may not take enforcement action against existing schools for violations until June 11, 2024, since the new regulations was adopted in June 2019. Nonetheless, we will contact DOE and look into this rat issue. He'll look into it. Find out.
Reach out to the rats.
Yeah, find out what the species of rat was, what color it was, how much it weighed, whether it was male, female, non-binary. Yeah, all of these important issues. They'll look into it, Jose. You read that correctly. Our government, by administration and the legislature's adoption of these rules, made it a rule that public schools can be unsafe and unhealthy to a degree that it would not otherwise be tolerated in establishments frequented by adults. One note of accountability. These rules were enacted before the first 6 months of the administration of the Governor Leon Guerrero. It's possible these rules were not drafted during Leon Guerrero's term, but during her predecessor, former Governor Eddie Calvo. They were enacted during the 35th Guam legislature. Several current senators also were members of that term. It's very interesting, right?
I'm not too keen on that last paragraph.
Yeah. Now, back in the 28th Guam legislature, back in 2003, 2005, a statute was enacted entitled, Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Public Education. And, you know, the smart money, when the smart legislatures, when their attention is called to the Adequate Public Education Act, will almost always come out with this one. Is that all we want? Don't we want an excellent public education? Are we going to be satisfied with adequate? No! And of course, the answer to that is no. In fact, I heard Malfunction say that at a chamber meeting just the other day. Don't we want excellent? Well, here's the rest of the story. Our Organic Act says that the government of Guam must provide an adequate public education for everybody between 6 and 16. Yeah, 6 and 16. Because our Organic Act actually has a provision in it for compulsory attendance at school. It's not statutory, it's organic. So if your kid is 6 years old and you don't send him to school, it's a violation of the Organic Act. Same with 16. And now the statutory numbers are lower and higher, but that's what the Organic Act says. So if you read the Adequate Education Act, you'll find that the explanation is that by making it mandatory to send kids to school, and by making it mandatory that schools provide an adequate public education, there is a right to an adequate public education that is analogous to a civil right. It's like it were part of the Bill of Rights and it's like the same, sort of like a local item in a Bill of Rights. You have a right to send your kid to school and make sure he gets an adequate public education. Now, there's no definition in the Organic Act as to what an adequate public education is. So the Adequate Education Act spells it out. And this is what it says. Adequate public education means public schools which at the minimum provide 1, a certified teacher for every class in a ratio established by relative collective bargaining agreements. 2, certified professional administrators. 3, certified guidance counselors. 4, certified school health counselors. 5, certified allied health professionals. 6, air-conditioned or properly ventilated classrooms in which the sensible air temperature is no greater than 78 degrees Fahrenheit. 7, potable water sufficient to provide each student a daily ration of drinking and washing water. 8, a reliable supply of electricity. 9, proper sanitation to include flushable toilets, clean restrooms, dining areas and classrooms. 10, adopted and required textbooks and workbooks each issued to each public school student for the classes in which he or she is enrolled. 11, libraries which meet the standards of the American Association of School Librarians, at each school operated by certified librarians. 12, healthful, safe, sanitary learning environment. There you go. 13, at least 180 instructional days or its equivalents, etc. And 14, regular, timely school bus transportation to and from the school for his attendance area established by 17 GCA Section 6102 for every child in accordance with policies adopted by the Education Policy Board. So it's pretty comprehensive, Jose. And item 12 certainly picks up rats laying around in the classroom. Now, this was passed in the 28th Guam legislature. It's Public Law 2845. So how the folks at Public Health could have enacted the rules that Nadu cited and how the legislature could have let it go by, it boggles the mind. How we'll tolerate such incompetence, such official incompetence. Now, the Every Child Act is not one of the toothless, let's do it this way acts, because the parents of a child enrolled in a public school have standing to sue for injunctive or writ relief against any public official who is not in compliance with this act. So parents, you don't have to take this stuff. You know, put yourself together, a group of parents, find yourself a public-spirited lawyer and bring suit. Bring suit against the principal of Southern High, the director, the board, Snow White, 4 of the dwarfs, and on, because until you do, this is not going to be any different. So far, no suit has been brought under the Every Child Act. I'm sad to say. And of course, tailgaters would know that this was Bill 1 in the 28th Guam legislature. The Republicans took the legislature away from the 27th. This same bill was introduced in the 27th, never even made it to a public hearing. a Democrat 27th. It was Bill 1 in the 28th. It was Public Law 2845. And could I have a round of applause here for the author, Jose?
I wonder who that is.
Yeah, well, I don't take credit for much, but that was my bill, Jose. And it's there. And one of my disappointments is we have a teachers union, which I've spent some time on myself.
Where are they?
Exactly. And they purport to be in favor of an adequate, of good education. One would think that they'd be the rallying point to take advantage of this statute and work on these things.
I think the most activity I've seen them, and this is anecdotal, is passing out tuberculosis shots, and that's probably it.
Yeah.
It's a big thing, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But my question on this story is, along with parents filing suit, teachers' aides or teachers can, or they would be the defendant in the suit.
They'd have to be parents, yeah, and they would not be defendants, because this could only be brought against public officials who could provide the remedy you're looking for. So if there's a rat in the classroom, the school principal could see to it that school is cleaned up. And the superintendent could see to it that the principal was told, no more rats in the classroom down there, find yourself another job. So it could work. And teachers who are parents could also do it. And my sense is that until somebody does, we're going to, talk show hosts are going to be talking about this 3 generations from now, because it won't get any better.
Well, we had a governor claim a island-wide state emergency and was able to direct the DPHSS to do some really restrictive things on stores and private businesses. What's stopping her from doing it for schools?
Exactly.
That's why I was not too keen on that last paragraph. Point out the history, but then say there's nothing stopping them from doing anything now.
Exactly. But, until, and it's the old thing, that's my priority. But if everything's a priority, of course, nothing's a priority. And in the 28th legislature, when we budgeted, one year, we did the budget for the Department of Education, got it out of the way, and then we did the rest of the budget. Because if you don't do it that way, this is what happens. The department submits its budget, and the gurus at the legislature will go through and cut here and cut there, because their mindset is, we got to do a budget for the whole government. So then the budget comes to the floor, and a senator who wants to spend more money on education because it is a priority makes a motion to increase the appropriation on line 5 of page 64, to say double it, and you can hear the opposition party, the Democrat, where are you going to cut? Where are you going to cut? And the idea is to give education what it needs and don't think about where you're going to cut. Then you know it's a priority. So we did that. We funded the really important ones, and for the rest of them, there was a pool of money, and we allowed the governor to allocate money amongst what I refer to sarcastically as the ash and trash. Now, here's something else that happened after the Adequate Education Act passed. A couple of directors got really serious about it, and they developed spreadsheets that were keyed to the 14 points. So they would show for each school, for instance, restrooms. In order to meet the 14 points, how many toilets did we need? How many toilets did we have? How much would it cost to buy the toilets we needed? They laid it all out like that, and it was a tremendous budgeting tool. But too much work, why not just kind of go in and shoot from the hip and kind of a by guess and by golly. So here we are with rats in the classroom. Rats, cockroaches, Southern High, is just a disaster. And how long have we been building Simon Sanchez High School? 10 years.
It's 99% almost done, though, Bob.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
For your safety and convenience, please listen to this message. Heavy haul transports for the new Ukadu power plant are occurring almost daily and will continue for the next few months. We encourage you to use alternate routes to avoid traffic delays. Alternate routes, project information, and live tracking are available at poweronthemove.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to receive Guam PDN text alerts. Doosan Ukadu Power and Doosan Enterability thank you for your patience and support.
Kami ang inyong bangko na tapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan na handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. Pan Pacific, where others dug branches, we place roots.
And they're off. The Churchill Downs, the home of the Kentucky Derby. 6 furlongs, I'll be crossing that finish line, putting the end to another exciting, elucidating episode of Tall Tales. But to help me get to that finish line, I've got another Joe who doesn't ride horses at Churchill Downs. He rides the merry-go-round on Tall Tales. He rode the merry-go-round during the first half, and he's climbing back on that merry-go-round again. So go for it, another Joe.
Yeah, I was one of those little kids that like to play Cowboys and Indians.
Cowboys and Indians? Whoa.
You're canceled.
Whoa.
I even had a coonskin cap. That's Mountain. Anyway, Bob, so that would suggest that if they have to, if the law says they must have adequate transportation, each student, then there has to be a public school bus system in order to make sure they have. Does it sound right or no?
Yes.
So that means, unfortunately, for people who want to replace it with the mass transit, it can't be done because it has to be specifically for education, right?
No, it says it must. Let me see what it says again here. Where did I put that? It says regular timely school bus transportation to and from the school for his attendance area. So who does not have school bus transportation? Another Joe. I think every kid on the island, unless he lives across the street from the school, has school bus transportation.
That's right. But I mean, they could not take away the bus system. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, there has to be a public bus system.
Well,
public school.
Okay. Now, in some jurisdictions, kids ride public transportation. They have a pass system and things like that. That could be accommodated.
Oh, and the other thing is that there has to be. You say there has to be a bargaining unit, and that means that there has to be a union.
That's the Guam Federation of Teachers. Yeah.
All right, just checking. Hey, thanks for just keep listening.
That was a dynamic call, wasn't it?
He almost got that ring.
Yeah, riding around and grabbing for that brass ring. Yeah, well, when I was working on this, I talked to a lot of people to try to achieve maximum acceptance here. And I sat down with representation of the Guam Federation of Teachers on more than one occasion to find out, what was important to them. And I don't think there's anything they wanted that didn't get into this bill. And that's why I'm a little bit disappointed here that they're not taking advantage of this bill. And I'm going to come right out and say it. The Guam Federation of Teachers in 1965, when several of us stood up, Local 1581 of the American Federation of Teachers, was a group of highly idealistic, ambitious, ethical, hardworking folks that really had some goals, really knew what we wanted to do. And there wasn't a whole lot of self-aggrandizement involved. But it's a lot different now, and it has gradually morphed into business unionism, paid staff, fancy office, on and
But
on.
there are also apologetics for a certain administration right now.
It seems that happens. It does, yeah.
They would not dare criticize this administration.
I don't think so. I think you're right, Jose. Okay, I'm going to spend a minute on Biden's blunders here before I say goodbye to the gentleman. On March 8, 2021, 6 weeks into his presidency, Biden was unable to recall the name of his Secretary of Defense, retired four-star Army General Lloyd Austin, at a White House ceremony. Quote, and I want to thank the former general, Biden vamped as he searched his memory for Austin's name, while a masked Vice President Kamala Harris side-eyed the president from behind his back. So there was finally something that Kamala knew. She finally had an answer to something, and she couldn't let it go. She had to side-eye the president. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there, Biden finished lamely. Minutes earlier, Biden had successfully managed to read Austin's name off a teleprompter. So maybe he can read this off his teleprompter. Let's go, Brandon!
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
First, in some ways, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot came in third last night. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Lightfoot loses her re-election bid.
Now, as we all know in life, in the end, you don't always win every battle. But you never regret taking on the powerful and bringing in the light.
Voters turned away from the city's first black female and first gay mayor as crime soars. The two top vote getters, Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson, advanced to a runoff on April 4th. As the country waits to hear whether President Biden will run for office again, he heads to Maryland today to meet with another group of Democrats.
The president will speak at the annual House Democratic Caucus Issues Conference. This year, the conference is in Baltimore, and Democrats are meeting after President Biden said this in Virginia Beach Tuesday in a speech that focused on health care, as he announced he'll roll out his budget March 9th.
I want to make it clear, I'm going to raise some taxes. Many of you are billionaires out there. You're going to stop paying at 3%.
He promised that no one making under $400,000 a year would be impacted.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. The Supreme Court appears to be leaning towards ruling against President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. Fox's Shannon Bream on the issues.
The debate, whether or not the HEROES Act, passed in 2003 to ease student loan payment obligations on those deployed in the wake of 9/11, gives the Biden administration authority not only to pause student loan payments, as was initially done under the Trump administration, but to also wipe out roughly $400 billion in principal, all with the stroke of a pen. The Biden administration argues Congress did act, that the law in question provided the pathway for Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to step in the face of the COVID emergency. Justice Kagan seems to agree.
However, during yesterday's hearing, some conservative justices questioned the program's legality. America's listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Brian Kilmeade, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts. from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, this is Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Every Tuesday, you'll hear what's on my mind. Plus, every Thursday, there's a special bonus episode where we answer the questions that are on your mind. Make sure to spend your Tuesdays and Thursdays with Trey. Subscribe now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Hope to see you.
America's listening to Fox News.
The head of the EPA visits East Palestine, Ohio for a third time as the area copes with the after effects of a toxic train derailment nearly 1 month ago.
Residents here say some of them have nausea, some rashes, stomach aches, and they want to know how long they could have these health concerns. The head of the EPA stood right here in the downtown in East Palestine and talked to those residents about their concerns, telling them they're here for the long haul and know people still have many unanswered questions. They opened up this welcome center here in the downtown where people can go in and request to have testing done both inside and outside of their home.
Fox's Alexis McAdams.